Hi, my name is Rocio Gonzalez. Today we will be going over a bit of an introduction to some of the different areas in psychology. First of all, there are two main purposes for why one might want to pursue a career in psychology. It can be for research or practice in psychology. When conducting research, one seeks to increase our knowledge in the topic of interest, whereas the practice of psychology, one applies this knowledge to solve real world problems. Both are just as important, but people may have a preference depending on which one of them suits their personality and strengths. For example, if you are really good at working with people and you enjoy their interaction, you might enjoy working in the practice of psychology instead of doing research. Since psychology can be associated to many different topics, a lot of new subfields of psychology are coming out constantly. But today I'm going to go over just a few of the subfields that might be the most popular or just the ones that are maybe more developed in today's society. So why don't I start with the subfield that most people think about when thinking of psychology, abnormal psychology. So abnormal psychology is involved with the assessment, the diagnostic, and the treatment and prevention of any sort of psychopathology. So this can include a variety of mental disorders that cause people distress uh, and stop them from functioning normally in their daily lives. So this can include anything from like depression or anxiety to something even as extreme as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So a lot of professionals work in this field as mental health clinicians, maybe just psychiatric nurses or just psychiatrists in general, give some sort of therapy. And this field is very similar to another field that is called clinical psychology. So they both pretty much do most of the same work, except that the difference is clinical psychologists tend to work with people that may be going through some sort of emotional distress. Maybe they're going to having some problems in their life. They're having maybe some event in their life that is causing them a lot of distress. So it's more of an environmental thing. Uh, when it's abnormal psychology, those psychologists tend to work with people that have actual like mental disorders that are affecting them a lot greater in their life. So maybe things that might be genetic, like I said, like bipolar disorder, that is a disorder that has been considered to be to run in families. So things that I guess you would consider a little bit more hardcore in terms of the diseases that way, and clinicians deal more with emotional type of problems. The vast majority of people that actually enter the field of psychology start out with some sort of interest in this normal psychology, either wanting to be therapists or clinicians. And sometimes along the way, they discover all these new subfields that have come out that they discover that just are a better match for their interest and maybe their personality and the type of work they actually have to do. For abnormal psychology, you typically have to be very strong mentally and just emotionally to be able to actually assist people in that are going through this type of distress themselves. So this is one of the most common subfields in psychology. Another subfield that tends to be equally as popular because people just find it interesting is biopsychology. So biopsychology is the area that can be known as other things like maybe behavioral neuroscience, psychobiology, or neuropsychology. This involves the study of the brain in terms of psychological processes. So biopsychologists study the relationship between the brain and behavior, so such as how the brain and the nervous system impact our thoughts, feelings, and moods. And biopsychology can lead us to our next subfield, which is cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is looking at understanding mental processes, the way that people think. It's similar to biopsychology in the sense that the source of these mental processes is the brain, so it looks at the brain to be able to study them and understand them. But by mental processes, I mean things like problem solving, decision making, language, intelligence, attention, memory, all things like this. So looking at kind of where in the brain they are located, how is it that they work, um, what happens when they stop working. So cognitive psychologists often use an information processing model to describe how the mind works and to just kind of see where it stores whatever it is that it's using to be able to perform these processes. One of the most popular of these that is the most studied as like memory. People are just fascinated by memory, by how we're able to retain all these different things throughout our life and what kind of things are considered important enough to actually be stored in what's called long-term memory, which we would have for pretty much the rest of our life, and then how we just for functioning reasons have other things that we store for a short amount of time. And so there are just so many different things that can happen with memory, like people losing the memory, just using chunks of memory, losing very specific types of memory. And this is what people find fascinating, that they see maybe at the way that it is stored as to why these differences and losses occur. Many times the cognitive psychologists describe the human mind as being kind of more of like a computer that just kind of processes similarly to computer and like stores information in different areas to be able to use in the future. Right, so our next subfield is developmental psychology. Developmental psychologists study the physical and the cognitive development that occurs over our lifespan. So, kind of how our minds and just our brains evolve from the moment that we are born to, to I guess, all the way up to death. So sometimes maybe they might be even looking at prenatal development if there's any consciousness or any maybe anything that's going on prenatally, but mostly whatever happens since the beginning when we start to learn our first words, by what age we should be understanding certain speech, when we should understand things like when if we don't see an object because we just can't see it, maybe it's covered by a blanket, we know that it's still there versus it just having disappeared. So there's a certain age that that might occur, or maybe at to a certain point that we start being more afraid of strangers for protection purposes, or maybe up to the point that we just feel more comfortable with everybody around us, that we're able to function mentally a whole lot better. So that's why developmental psychologists typically work more with the population of infants, young children, adolescents, and maybe emerging adulthoods. So that's who they're usually working with the most because they're still going through some major mental developments. They might also be studying maybe how developmental delays affect people growing up, what can be expected for them living as adults, how normal of a life will they be able to have, or how any methods can help them to just be able to function as normally as possible. One subfield that is fairly new in psychology is health psychology. So this one rose as there seemed to be more need for a greater focus in health and the relationship between psychology and biology. So there might be like some environmental factors that influence health physically, but a lot of times they can influence health mentally too, and some they tend to go hand in hand. That some things that are going on mentally might be affecting our physical body. So the most common problem you might see is when somebody is undergoing stress. Stress tends to have a very broad effect on our bodies. So they can just cause a lot of different things going on in our physical body, even though it's something that's happening very mentally to us. So to some people it causes maybe I don't know diarrhea, something like that, or it might be just causing heart problems, just sweats, things like that, just things that make you feel very physically ill, but it's all caused because of some sort of mental situation that you have going on. A lot of times, our physical body, too, if we're not taking care of our physical body, it might be affecting our mental well being, or vice versa. We can maybe address our physical health in order to be able to help our psychological health. And for example, exercising is something that is seen as something physical that we can do that helps us a lot mentally. It helps reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So, health psychologists often have to deal with health related issues such as weight management, smoking cessation, stress management, and even nutrition. They may also be involved in designing public prevention programs that are designed to kind of educate people about risky behaviors that they might have in their daily lifestyle that might be affecting their health. So, maybe how to adopt healthier habits that can help them both physically and mentally. So, with now obesity rates rising so high, and just also nutrition being incredibly low in our country, considering that we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world, there seems to be a great need for these people to be addressing both physical and mental well being. So, lastly, we have school psychology. School psychologists work within the educational system to be able to help children with any emotional problems they might be going through, social or academic issues. Maybe they're going through something at home that is affecting how they perform in school, or maybe they're suffering from bullying, having maybe being isolated from their peers, and that can be causing too much distress, so that they're just performing not well at all at school. Maybe they're having academic issues. They're just something is going on that is preventing them from being able to pay attention in class, to be able to just absorb the information and retain it. So these psychologists typically collaborate with teachers, parents, and the students themselves to be able to look and find a solution to their academic and social and emotional problems. So they might come up with a plan that maybe might include um, some some therapy session, maybe some meetings with parents, or just collaborating with everybody to see any individual needs that this student might have that will just help them succeed academically. So most psychologists work in elementary schools or maybe middle schools, but others might work in maybe private clinics and give their services from there. Hospitals, maybe state agencies, and even universities. Uh, College students also might be going through a lot of these problems that need assistance. It's not necessarily just in lower grade schools. So some of them might even go into private practice and maybe become consultants, especially if they have a doctoral degree and school psychology. They tend to go for things, greater things like that. So these were some of the subfields in psychology that we reviewed today. There are many more arising as the greater need for involving psychology in all these different fields of study that we have. It's becoming more and more popular to just find a collaboration between psychology and a lot of different fields, especially medical and biological. But these are some of the ones that you can be looking at if you're interested in a career in psychology. Thank you so much for your attention today. Have a great day.